Okay, geweldig. Zok the Heilige Gemara. We are right on the top of Pei Aleph and Aleph. And the Gemara was behandling Rav Ashi's shot in Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Ashi learned that Rabbi Eliezer holds Ein Bila. And because of that, that posed a whole bunch of problems. And the last kasha that we were dealing with was the Mishnah says, according to everybody, that if a carbon that needs 4 matonis, like an oiler and a shlomim, which needs shtei matonis shein arba, got mixed in with the dam of a carbon that only needs 1 matana, such as bechor or meiser. So what you do is, we had a machlokes. Rabbi Eliezer held, do 4 matanis, and Rabbi Yeshua said, this is Baal Toiser. So, for the Gemara, the way Rabbi Ashi is going to have to learn this Mishnah is that when we say that the dam of 4 got mixed in with the dam of 1, you have to say it was exactly 4 and exactly 1, and you spritzed on 4, and the psakas you spritzed on 4 karnos together. But if that was the case, why would Rabbi Yeshua say that there's an Isabel Toisef when you're spritzing on 4 karnos the dam of the Bechor Meiser? There's only 1 matnas dam there. So therefore, how could you possibly be over Baal Toisef? That was the problem that we had. That's checkmate. We had 5 different kashas on Rabbi Ashi's interpretation of Rabbi Eliezer, and he would be able to doicha all of them by saying that speaking where you had roiv of the dam chatos, amit of dam oila, and what you spritzed to Milo was more than the full amount of the dam oila. So therefore, there was for sure some dam chatos spritzed to Milo, and Ashi can have to Rabbi Eliezer that is the tachtonim are oluloi. They're not oluloi l'shem oila. They're only oluloi l'shem chatos. Now we're going to abort that entire mahalach. And Ella Amarava, the Balalai Pligi. Your whole kasha is if there's dam in 1 container mixed of chatos and oila, well, then you have this problem. Since Ein Bila, maybe all of the dam where the oila was spritzed l'mayla, maybe all of the dam and the chatos was spritzed l'mato, so you had to come up with these different configurations to make it work. But now we don't have that problem anymore, because in the case of bolol, maybe in fact Rabbi Eliezer would agree that you can't be yotze not chatos, not oila, because you might be spritzing the dam that's supposed to be l'mayla l'mato and vice versa. Where is the case where Rabbi Eliezer holds you could spritz l'mayla l'mata? He pligi b'kaisos. Yes, the dam was mixed, but it wasn't blended together. You had a kais of dam that you know belongs to the chatos. You had a kais of dam that you know belongs to the oila, but you don't know which is which. You didn't label the kaises. So you definitely know one of them is for the chatos. You definitely know one of them is for the oila. Or in this last case that we're discussing, one kais is zikr for the oila that needs shtei matonos and arba, and one kais is zikr for the meiser bechor that only needs 1 matana, but you don't know which is which. Now you no longer have the problem. If you spritz the chatos and the oila on the top half of the mizbeach, you don't have a problem that maybe there's only oila here and no chatos, because there's 2 distinct kalim, and from both kalim you're spritzing l'mayla and l'mata. So that resolves all the problems. Keep ligi b'kaisais. And Rabbi Eliezer is the right. Rabbi Eliezer holds, yes, misafik, you're spritzing dam from a carbon oila on the top half of the mizbeach. But he's not worried about that, because he holds you can look at it like it's water, and therefore you could spritz it anyway, misafik. The Rabbanon less luroin, and that's why the Rabbanon say yishafech la'amo, because if you don't know if this kais has in it oila or chatos, you can't misafik spritz it on top and say if it's from the oila it should be like mine. That doesn't work. That whole concept doesn't work. Zog to Gemara. So you're telling me ubabala loy pligi, the machloikis in our Mishnah that's discussed does not apply to bala at all? I'm going to prove to you that the case of the Mishnah has to also include a case of Bolol, and then we're back to square one. Because according to Rabbi Eliezer, you have the Shaila, maybe all the oil was spritzed Lamaila, and maybe all the Chatas was spritzed Lamata. This is what the Brisa said. And we had this Brisa already before. We have a Machloikis on our Mishnah. Our Mishnah said the whole Machloikis Rabbi Eliezer. And the Chachamim are in a case of when a Chatas come mixed up with an oil. Rabbi Yehuda says, and the whole question is if you say Royan or not. Rabbi Yehuda said that's not at all what the Machloikis is about, not the case, and not the Svara for the Machloikis. Everybody agrees. The Rabban don't argue. Unlike our Mishnah, who says that's where the Machloikis is, Rabbi Yehuda says no. The Chachamim are Moida. You do say right. And by Revei of Nerva, Shaloyikav. Even Rabbi Eliezer holds you shouldn't do it. Because, yeah, you could say right Kilumayim, but Revei of Nerva, so mias, you don't spritz it at all. You don't spritz it at all. It's not appropriate. So where in fact is there a Machloikis between Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim? Al dam tamimim shenis arev the dam bailasmin. You have dam of a carbon that's a tam, kosher carbon, proper zrika, but you also have dam that's of a balmum. So Rabbi Eliezer Omer Yikar, Rabbi Eliezer says that you should be makrivit, you should spritz the dam. Bein bebalul, bein bekaisos. So Rabbi Yehuda, the Brisa specifically states that according to Rabbi Yehuda, it's mefurish. According to Rabbi Yehuda, it's mefurish that they're arguing bein bebalul, bein bekaisos. That's a mefurish of Brisa. The Chachamim say you shouldn't be makravit. And if you remember, we learned that the svara as to why Rabbi Eliezer holds you could spritz the balmum and the Chacham said not, is because it says mum boy. Rabbi Yehuda learns the only mum that's also to spritz is dam on the mizbeach is if you know that this is dam from a balmum. But if it's a suffix, if it got mixed, there is no prohibition b'chalal of spritzing such dam on the mizbeach. Therefore, if it's a suffix, Rabbi Eliezer holds no problem. Spritz it on the mizbeach. The Chacham hold not. But the point is, if the Brisa quoted by Rabbi Yehuda clearly states that the Machloikis is bein bebol and bein bekaisos, and Rabbi Yehuda is only disputing with our Mishnah what the case of the Machloikis is. But as far as where it applies to, bein bebol, bein bekaisos, our Mishnah should say the same thing. Zok to Gemara, that's not a kasha. Rabbi Yehuda, alibud Rabbi Eliezer, masni, bein bebolo, bein bekaisos. Rabbi Yehuda in his brisa, yes, he learns in Rabbi Eliezer the machloikis is bein bebol, bein bekaisos, and the machloikis is about a completely different concept as to whether or not a mum that's not detected. We don't know. It's a suffix. It's mixed in. Whether or not the Torah prohibits that to be spritzed on the mizbeach. But the Rabbanon in our Mishnah, who state that the machloikis is where the dam chatos got. Oh, thank you so much. Got mixed in with the dam oila. Thank you very much. With the dam oila. Thank you very much. They say because those pligi, like we're answering over here on Amud Beis, that the machloikis is only if the damim are not mixed together. We're just confused between kais A and kais B. Thank you very much. Zog to Gemara weiter. Omar Abaye. Loi shanu, this machloikis that we had is elot chilas chatos va'oila. The way not we were learning according to Rabbi Ashi, but even now, even according to Rabbi Ashi, the whole machloikis is chilas chatos va'oila. Meaning, you have the dam of a chatos that had not yet been spritzed, that requires zrikas adam on the karnos hamizbeach. You have the dam of a carbon oila that just needs to be spritzed on the lower wall of the mizbeach. If those two got mixed together, that's where we're having our discussion where the Chachamim holds you cannot process this and you shafech lama. But what about soiv chatos v'oila? What if you have two bodies of dam, two questions of dam. One is from an oil that you know there was no zrika done at all, but the other one was some machatos, but the zrika was already done, and now all that's remaining to be done with this dam is shvichas shirayim eliyasoid. So now they're both quite similar in their avodah. The oila, the dam of the oila needs to be spritz on the wall of the mizbeach, the lower wall. The shirayim of the dam of the chatos, that has to be on the aside, both on the lower half of the mizbeach. So zok to Gemara, if that was the case, zok to Abaye, avol soid chatas va'oila divri akoil makam oila makam shirayim. Meaning, even when you're spritzing the dam on the wall of the mizbeach, it would work for the shirayim. Let's have a look at Rashi. Makam oila makam shirayim. Rashi says avol soif chatos. It's in the fourth wide line. Rashi says shinis arav betchilas oila. So you have the chatos that all now that it requires is shvichas shirayim liyasoid, and now you're not sure if this is the blood of the oila shinis arvu that got mixed together. Lashana is am I in the right place? Oh no, here it is. Shenisavu shiyore chatos betchilas oila. The shirayim of the dam of the chatos got mixed in with the dam of the oila that still needs rika. Ein kan machloikis. There the chachamim would agree. The yitneim lamata menachut. Spritz them on the wall of the mizbeach on the lower half. The mokim tchilas matan oila kosher l'shiyore chatos. You don't have to pour it directly onto the yisoid, even for the shiyore chatos. You could dump it on the wall of the mizbeach, which is exactly where the zrikas adam is for the oila, and then it'll run down the wall to hit the yisoid. The yizrakim lakira mizbeach umeelein shoyshesin liyisoid ben kanchina mokim. So we can technically say that if you do the right avodah for the dam of an oila, that also is the same avodah that would be appropriate for the shirayim of the chatos. So therefore, the rabbanan would be moida because you don't need to say ra'in. You're servicing both bloods in the same fashion. That is what Abaye said. That's the chiddush of Abaye. That's what we're going to be discussing most of the day today. Amalei Rabbi Yosef. So Rabbi Yosef told Abaye, I'm afraid that will not work because they actually don't have the same requirements. Because he said, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Hachi Amar Rabbi Yehuda, this is what Rabbi Yehuda taught us, Shirayim Tzrichen Itztava. The Shirayim need to be poured not on a vertical surface, but on a horizontal surface, like a step. So pouring the Shirayim and the Chadas on the wall of the Mizbeach and letting it run down onto the side, that is not the proper matana of dam required for Shirayim. It has to be poured directly onto the step, and that wouldn't work for Oila, as we had limudim earlier. So therefore, your theory doesn't work, and the rabbanan would not be moida in this case if the oila, the dam of the oila, got mixed in with shiyare chatos. They would not be moida that it would be okay. Reb Shimon said the same thing. What we didn't say about this machloikis between Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim el tchilas chatas v'oila. Abel soif chatas v'oila, where it's either shirayim with the chatas or the dam of the oila. Divrei akoil makam oila makim shirayim, just like Abaye said. So Reb Shimon said like Abaye, Abaye said like Abaye, but Rabbi Yosef tells us that according to Rabbi Yehuda, that is not accurate because the makam shvichas shirayim is on the tread on the horizontal surface. The makam shvichas oila is on the vertical surface. Amar Rabbi Yochanan v'Temer Rabbi Elazar. Adayin hi machloikis is still a machloikis for the same svara that Rabbi Yosef quoted from Rabbi Yehuda, and that is that the makam shirayim has to be on the horizontal surface. Mazav Rav Huna bar Yehuda. It says kodesh heim. Let's look at the pasuk inside. Ach bechor shor, oy bechor kesef, oy bechor eis, loy sifte kodesh heim. They're all kodesh. It's comparing a whole group of karbonos together. As damam loy sizrek alam, as damam tizrek alam mizbeach, Is chalvam tackle ishe l'rech l'chorech l'Hashem. Cannot be pointed b'chor or meiser. They need to be brought as karbonos. So what we learn from kodesh Shem is b'haviyosayim, they remain kodesh, meaning Shem is arv b'dam kochem achayim. Even if the dam of b'chor and meiser, which only need one matana, if they got mixed in with the dam of other karbonos, yikruvu, they should still be spritzed on the mizbeach. So the Torah is telling us, even blood of a b'chor ma'aser that got mixed with blood of another carbon, spritz it anyway. So what is the pasuk referring to? What did the blood of the b'chor and ma'aser get mixed up with? My love, soif oila u'b'chor. Let's say, since it's including every type of mix-up, it's very broad, kodesh Shem, maybe it's even referring to a mix-up. If you don't know whether this is dam of the oila, but not dam of the oila, the shiurei oila. So you already spritzed the oila. Now you have shiurayim of the oila. You know where the shirayim of the oila belongs? It belongs exactly in the same place where shirayim of the chatos belongs. So shiurei oila is the same thing as shiurei chatos. So my love, soif oila ubechar. That's even referring to soif oila ubechar. And if that's the case, the bechar needs to be spritzed on the wall of the mizbech. The shirayim of the oila have to be spritzed on the side. But you see from here, shemami no makam oila makam shirayim. So you have proof to Abaye's shita that in fact you could even pour the shirayim on the wall. It doesn't have to be on the horizontal. Zogt Gemara, no, that's lav dafka what it means. Lo tchilas oila b'chor. Maybe it's tchilas oila b'chor is what the pasuk is referring to. That both require a zrika on the wall of the mizbech. So why do I need a pasuk to tell me that if there's two karbonos that got mixed up and their zrikas have exactly the same format that you could do it misafik, there's no problem over here? No, there is a problem because maybe dam of atal dam. Maybe if they were mixed together in one keli, if there was more dam of the oila, it would be mevatal the dam of the bechor or vice versa. So kamash malon the ein oilin mevatlin ze'eseh. Now we have to take a moment because why didn't the Gemara suggest my love if we're referring to al karbonos? Maybe it's referring to soif chatos ubechar because that's really what we were discussing the whole time. Is soif chatos. Why did it pick soif oil? So Rashi gives us a little insight of this. Umay love, in the middle of Rashi, kodesh Shem. Matters up at the beginning of Rashi. Kodesh Shem, the bechor ksef. It mentions that in the pasuk discussing bechor. Umashim aleichem bav Yosy and you. Kodesh Shem means they should always remain in their status. Meaning, Shem is arvu b'damim acherim. If the blood of the bechor can mix in with the blood of another carbon, lo avdu hashemam, they won't lose their identity of dam of a bechor v'yikriv when you make zrika anyway. Uli Rabbanan, according to Rabbanan, misukma, we will shtaline that what it's referring to. Is arv bitachtoinim kamoisai v'loy b'chatos. You know why we didn't want to pick a chatos? Because we wanted to pick a carbon that, even though the chatchila the zrika of it is similar to the zrika of the bechor, meaning where the zrika is done on the lower half of the mizbeach. A chatos, the chatchila the dam is put on the top of the mizbeach. That's not what we wanted to say the pasuk is referring to. We wanted to say the pasuk maybe is referring to only with similar damim, where the dam, where do you say kodesh Shem, where the dam is spritzed in the same place. Umay lav. So let's say the arv b'soif oila shows shirayim. Where is shirayim of the oila go? You pour out the shiyari dam oila in exactly the same place as the shiyari dam chatos, as we learned in Perek Ezot Kaiman, Tain liyasoid lemizbeach shaloila, meaning that all karbonos you should spritz their shirayim, you should pour out the shirayim on the yasoid. The katani, and the Brayta tells us that tchilas bechor kasher boy lechatchila, the mixture of bechor which had not yet had a zrika with the dam of an oila that already had a zrika, it's lechatchila to spritz them both on the mizbeach. Shemekoymay mokoym tchilas oil. the main place for the Bechor to be spritzed is Makam Tchilas, not on the side, but on the wall of the Mizbeach. What do you see from here? Alma Makam Tchilas Oilo, Tchilas Bechor, is also a Makam Kosher L'Shvicha Shirayim L'Chatchil. So therefore, we have support to Abaye's Yisoid. But Frank the Gemara, so the Gemara wanted to neutralize that. No, that's not what it's referring to. It's referring to Tchilas Oilo and Tchilas Bechor. Frank the Gemara, why would I need a pasuk for Tchilas Oilo and Tchilas Bechor? They have the same Zrika. Teretz is that Ein Dam Mevatel Dam. But Frank the Gemara, Hai Mivelokach Midam HaPar Midam HaSoyer Nafka. We know there's a famous limud, the dam of the par of Yom Kippur and the dam of Zeir of Yom Kippur were mixed together, and together they spritz their dam on the Mizbeach HaPnimi. So the problem is there's so much more dam par than there is dam seir. So if you mix them together, why wouldn't the dam seir become batal b'roi? You have a raya from this halacha that in fact dam is not mevatel dam. So if I already know that from the parasha of Yom Kippur, why do I need another limud by the Parsha Bechor of Kodesh to teach me the same halacha? It's actually the makor of how you know ein dam. Mevatel dam is a machlekes tanoi. There are some who learn it from the Parsha of Yom Kippur, and there are some who learn it from Kodesh. And we're going to soon see there's a third shita. And the Gemara at the end is going to say, if there's three different pshatim of how you know that ein dam mevatel dam, obviously, two mandamim don't hold a third one. So we're going to have to give a good reason why there are those Tanaim who reject learning it from Velok Hadam, Hapar Madam Basir. We're going to have to find a good reason why the Tanaim who didn't learn it from Kodesh reject that. And we're going to have to know the third reason that we're soon going to learn why these two Tanaim rejected that. So the Gemara is going to go through that a little bit later. Masav Rav. So Frank Rav Akasha. It says in the pasuk, "V'krivui b'nei Arnis Adam, v'zarkus Adam." This is in Vayikra. The Torah seems to mention dam too many times. It says the shachat es ben abokar lefnei Hashem, v'krivui b'nei Aron hakayanim es Adam, v'zarku es Adam al hamizbeach. Even the v'krivui b'nei Aron hakayanim Adam is a little bit extra, because what else are you being makriv? After a shechita, what else are you going to be doing if not being makabel dam? But even if that dam you could say belongs there, but v'zorkus adam, it should have just said the kriva b'nei akaris adam, v'zorku al mizbeach. What's the extra es adam? It's mentioning es adam too many times. So zog to Gemara says the kriva b'nei akaris adam, v'zorkus adam, ma talmud loimer. Dam. Why does it say dam so many times? Because sheyachol. I could have thought, ainly ella elu shenis arvu bitmurasa. I would have thought that when do you say if two damim got mixed together that you are going to be makriv them both? You'll make shrik on them both. That's only if it's an animal that got mixed up with its own tamura. Because sha'af mechayim tikra. Even if you got mixed up with which animal is which while they were alive, you would still be makriv both of them. So therefore, if their domim got mixed up, you would be makriv both of them. But minayin l'rabbi's toida u'shlamim. How do I know that if a toida or a shlamim got mixed in with an oila? Now, if that would have happened while they were alive, you couldn't just be makriv them both. You'd have to be yirat sheyistoiv. So zog to Gemara, marbani toida u'shlamim. The dam tells you that even if the dam of a toida and shlamim got mixed in with the dam of the oila, you could still spritz it, and you'll say min b'mina is loy batel. Zok Gemara marbani toida u'shlamim shabon b'nedu the davar kamoisa. There are carbonates that are still somewhat similar to the carbon oila. Minayin l'rabbi says ha'asham, which has no similarity to an oila. How do you know that if the dam of the oila got mixed with the dam of the asham, it's also nothing's batel? Marba is asham, so that you have dam for that as well. So this same dam is being marba, the dam of any carbon that got mixed in with the dam of an oila, there would be no batel. Marbani is Osham, Shaton Matan Dal Kamoisai. Okay. Osham has some similarity with the oil. It also needs Shnaim Shemarba. But what about if the oil got mixed with the dam of a Bechor, Maisu, Pesach? That only need one matana. How do you know there as well? You say that the dam is not Mvatal dam. Minayin. Tabadloimer, dam. Any dam that got mixed in with any other dam will not be bottled. So now we've had a third makor, right? We have kodesh shem, we have v'lachach midam apar midam aseir, and we have dam. So we have three separate independent makoros that ain't dam ma'avatal dam. We're going to have to know why each of these tanaim chose his limud over the other two. But I'll call upon them. The Brisa tells us Allah that damim that are together, you don't have a problem. My love, let's say it's speaking even since we're being so inclusive of every scenario that dam is not mavatal dam. So maybe my love soif oila ubechar, even in the case of soif oila ubechar. So obviously the makam zrika for both will be the same. Meaning you could be mekayim shvicha shirayim by dumping the dam on the wall of the mizbech. Once again, you have a riot to abaya as you saw. So that maybe that's not the case we're referring to. Maybe that's the case. What's the chiddush of the pasuk? If they're both spritzed on the same place on the mizbeach, so what's the chiddush that you can both? What's the chiddush that you could be zorik both these damim misafik? What's the chiddush? The chiddush is they in oil mevatl zeh. Fragt Gemara, but mivalakach midam apar midam aseir nafka. We have another limud for it. So now we have three limudim. So Gemara tanoi ikad nafka nafka vikad nafka nafka. Now the Gemara wants to know each Tana why it didn't say like the others. Mahani tanoi, the two tanoim that don't learn it from valakach midam apar midam aseir on Yom Kippur loyofi. You know why? Because kasavri ein ma'arvin lekarnos. They held that the way the avodah was done was not how, as we said. I said a moment ago that you take the dam of the par, the dam of seir, mix them together in one container, and from that blended dam, you spritz on the karnish of the mizbech hapnimi. But, and if that was the case, Taka, so you'd have a raya in dam of dam. But that's not how it was done. They actually took vidlach midam par, midam seir, not mixed together. They actually walked around with two containers, and they spritzed the dam of the par and the dam of the seir. So you don't see anything about bittul from the case of Yom Kippur. Okay. Midam dam lo yalef. Why didn't they want to learn it from dam, this last brisa that we had? Because they all dam lo mashmalu. You can't learn all these halachas from dam. Okay. And what about el mikodesh shem my time lo yalfi? Why wouldn't they want to learn of kodesh shem? It says kodesh shem by the dam of the bechor to tell us about Yosy and Yehu. They never become bottle. Zok Gemara, you know why they don't like that? Because Savri Kodesh Haim is a different drasha. It's Haim Kraven, Vein Timuras and Kraven. There's a limit from Kodesh Haim that the Timur of a Bechor you're not makrin. The Timur of a Maish you're not makrin. That's what he uses Kodesh Haim for, not to teach you anything about Domim that got mixed up. I'm sorry? Well, and what's that? Okay, very good. Very okay, good. The idach nafkalei may imshar imseh lashem. So if you learn kodesh to teach you about mixing damim, so how are you going to know this important halacha that the temura of a bechor is not karev? That Gemara, we learn it from imshar imseh lashem. Who karev vein temurasai karev. Let's look at the pasuk inside. Tis ach bechor asher yibaker Hashem ba'behema lo yakdish ish oisai imshar imseh lashem hu. So we learn who davke the animal itself. The bechor goes as a carbon, but not its temur. Okay, go out. Tashma. Nasan l'mayla v'loy nimlach. There was a case in our Mishnah, or there's a case I think in our Mishnah or in the Brisa where dam got mixed together. And according to the Chachamim, to the dam oil and dam chatas got mixed together. And according to the Chachamim, you shouldn't do anything. It's yishafech la'ama. According to Belazar, you spritz it l'mayla and you look at the dam oilos if it's not there. So the question is, according to the Chacham, once you already spritzed l'mayla, now all that's left is spritz l'mata. So the halach is elu ve'elu moed. Now this was a brayso we quoted yesterday at the end. Elu ve'elu moed and Sai Rabbi Eliezer and Sai the Chachamim are moed at this point sheyachshav yitein l'mata, because there's no concern over here. Because what do you have left over here? Shirayim of the chatos and the oila. They both go l'mata. The elu ve'elu oilim. Mylav. What's the case? The i'ar of chatos v'oila, dam of a chatos got mixed together with dam of an oila, and the chiv in the yoiv le'lamayla. Since we already made this rika l'mayla, because that was the case, nostan l'mayla v'nimlach, havelu shirayim. The dam that we have now are either the dam of an oila or shirayim of the chatos. Vikatani. What does the Mishnah or the Brisa say? Elu ve'elu moedim, Sai Rabbi Eliezer inside the Chachamim are moeda sheyachshav yitin l'mata. That you could spritz the dam at the bottom. So if you're going to spritz the dam at the bottom, that means you're going to spritz dam that might be oila, it might be chatos. You're going to spritz it on the lower half of the mizbeach, and it's going to work sai for the oila and sai for the chatos. The variety from that Brisa to Abaye that the makam shirayim would also be good if you poured it on the lower wall of the mizbeach, which is what you're going to do with this dam because of the safek oila. So once again, you have a raya to Abaye. Zok to Gemara, he also Rabbi Yitzchak bar Yosy, he said you don't have a raya. He also Rabbi Yitzchak bar Yosy, Amar, Ami b'may in my Rava they said that that's not the case there. Hacha b'may askinin, you know what you can learn shot of the case of nosan l'may level in nimlach, elu ve'elu moedim shiach shavitin l'mata. You know what that could be speaking? Is kagoyin the arev chatas hachitzoyna b'shirayim. What happened was you had dam of a chatas hachitzoyna, which needs zrika on the four cardinals. You have shirayim of a chatas hapnimi. What do you do with the shirayim of the chatas hapnimi? You pour it on the yesod. So now you have dam of a chatas hachitzoyna, which requires zrika l'mayla, that was mixed in with a chatas of shirayim. Now, what you're supposed to do is yishafech la'am, because you can't spritz this blood on the mizbeach. It might be shirayim of the pnimi. But if mistakenly someone went and spritzed the dam on the karnois, so now, regardless, it's either shirayim of chatas hachitzoni or shirayim of chatas hapnimi. Both of them need shvicha shirayim liyasoid. So you don't pour it on the wall of the mizbeach. You actually pour it on the horizontal step of the yasoid of the mizbeach, and they have exactly the same application. Maybe that's what the Brisa is talking about, and therefore you don't have a raya that the mokim zrikas dama oila would also be good for shricha shirai. Amalei Abaye. So Abaye asked Rabbi Yitzchak, I don't understand. Why do you have to pick pnimi chatzoni once you're talking about shirayim? The name of Mark, you go the arvav b'shirayim. Say the shirayim of one chatos, go mix it with the shirayim of another chatos, or the shirayim of a chatos, go mix it with the shirayim of the oila. Because basically what you're saying is both of these require a zrika on the aside. Zog to Gemara, we bedavka wanted to pick a case where it's not the real dam of the chatas that had not yet been spritzed with the shirayim of the chatas hapnimi. You know what? Now let's have a look over here. We have dam that we already spritzed from the chatois hapnim. Now, what's supposed to be done with this dam? The remainder of the dam is supposed to be spritzed onto the side. There's a shita who holds that by the chatas hapnimi, every step must be followed, and if you don't pour the dam onto the side, that carbon will be possible. Now, what happens if you did pour the dam on the side, but you spilled some out before? So you made this rika, some blood spilled, and the remainder you spilled on the side, but there's some of that remainder missing because it spilled out in between the matanos on the mizbech hapnimi and the shvicha shirayim l'yisarei chitzoni, in between some spilled out. Would that be a problem? Because if it was, we'd have an issue over here. Because what are we doing? We have this blood, we're not sure if it's from the chatas hapnimi the shirayim or if it's from the chatzah chitzoni. So what do we need to do? We need to spritz some of it on the top half of the mizbeach. Right? That's what happened over here. The case was nimlach, loy nimlach, and he just made zrika with this combined dam on the top of the mizbeach. That means when you're coming out to pour the shirayim, you're missing some of that dam. So maybe that's the chiddush. Even if you hold that you must pour the shirayim of the chatzah pnimi on the side of the mizbeach hachitzoni, but chosru ein makvin. Even if some of it went missing, like in our case, because some of the dam was spritzed l'mayla, that will not be ma'akav, as long as there's some shirayim that can be spritzed l'yisoid, we're going to be happy, and it's going to be a kosher korban. Amalei Rava Tosfah Ravina. Frank Rava Tosfah Ravina, I don't understand. Didn't we go through in detail and length to understand what the brisa was referring to? It was a whole day yesterday. We were analyzing these brises. And this is not how we concluded yesterday. Amalei Rava Tosfah Ravina Halkimna Hahi Beruba El Yoinin V'Kayoyim Lamayla Shir Tachtonim Void. Isn't that how we ended up explaining the brisa according to Rav Ashi's understanding of Rabbi Eliezer that Ein Bila? He said the case was you had oila dam with chatos dam, you had 10 ounces of chatos, 2 ounces of oila. Zok Rabbi Eliezer spritzed at least 3 ounces of this mixture on the top half of the mizbeach, so you know for sure you got some chatos dam in there. That was the case. So what are you changing everything around over here? Amr lei, and if that was the case, then you do have a right for the shvich hashirayim. It's the same thing as pouring it on the wall of the mizbeach. Amalei, so they told Rabbi Tisra, Ravina told Rabbi Tisra back, what are you talking about? That was only in the attempt to emphasize the brisa according to Rabbi Ashi. We just aborted it. The first thing we learned today was we aborted that whole mahala, and we said it's being bekaisis. Yes, that was all Amud Beis. But this morning, we were chayshim from the whole business. That was the Amud Makara in Bila. Maskana Makaisis plea. The maskana is that the whole thing is speaking about kaisis. So Viter, you don't have a raya. Viter, you don't have a raya to Abaye, as you said. Okay, Gavalti. Let's have a quick peek at Rashi, then we'll chop around the Mishnah. Maskana to Amalei, Hanamili, so Ravina told Rabba, Hanamili, Hanach Shenuya, the Shanina La'il, all those terutzim that we gave yesterday. That was Lamai, the Havas Hokadatach Mikar Divibol. That was when we still thought that all those brises we're talking about, the dam was mixed together in the same container. The Avamadrin on Ashinuy Dechiki, we were relying on some very dochik shotim to squeeze it in, to shoehorn Rabbi Ashi's pshat into Rabbi Eliezer. Lo'ukme the Rabbi Ashi, the Amar Rabbi Eliezer in Bila, the Latish Leach Masnisa. So we shouldn't have kashas. But the Maskana, we're free from all that. Maskana the Shinuya Hadarnabon. We were chayja from that whole mahala. Vu Kimna Lishinuye, the Plukta did who, Bach Masnisin, but Tarayvis Kaisasu. We ended up saying that all those Friediger brises are speaking when there's a Tarayvis of Kaisas. So Bila doesn't come into the question. The whole question is, can you spritz the dam oila misafik on the top of the mizbeach? And Rabbi Eliezer told you could, the Chamod you can't. Umitevayu k'amar Rabbi Eliezer. And on both of these cases, Rabbi Eliezer said, the lace of l'mayla u'lamato shneim ksherin. Side the dam that might be dam oila, side the dam that might be dam chatos, spritz it l'mayla, and they'll both be kosher. Ve'echen the nasan l'mayla v'loy nimla. And if, when you have two cases, you don't know which is which, someone already put down from both of them l'mayla, then divrei hakoyel, even the chachamim agreed to Rabbi Eliezer, yitin lamata ve'elu ve'elu alu. Put it lamata, side the dam that you think is oila, side the dam that you think is chatos, spritz it on the lower half of the mizbeach, and it will work. That's what the chacham say in the brisa. The Iav Muki law, Rabbi Yitzchak, bechatos ve'oila avakoshle. So therefore, Rabbi Yitzchak by Yosef early on said, "Hagabamai skin the Arab chatos chitoyne b'shirayim." He had to say that was the case, because if he said it was speaking by the chatos and the oila, we would be back to square one. It would be back to square. So therefore, he was forced to learn that it's speaking where you have two chatois that are mixed together, and therefore it neutralizes the entire raya that the mokam oila is good for the shvichas hashirai. Okay, Gavalti. Zog the Mishnah weiter. We'll just leave the Mishnah and we'll stop here. Hanitnin b'fnim shenis arvu b'nitnin b'chutz. We've been talking about different domes that are mixed together. So now we're mixing in karbonos that are supposed to be b'chutz to karbonos that are supposed to be b'fnim. The halacha is b'fnim means that you spritz them on the mizbeach hapnimi, like the parim b'rishot tzibor and the chatas of the nasi. So hanitnin b'fnim, I'm sorry, the chatas of the kohen Mashiach. Hanitnin b'fnim shenis arvu b'nitnin b'chutz yishav chul amma. Everybody holds there's nothing you can do about it. You have to dump it out. Even Rabbi Eliezer wouldn't say that you look at it like it's mine. The Gemara is going to ask why. How about nosam b'chutz, the chazav and nosam b'fnim? What if you spritz the blood b'chutz and then you spritz the b'fnim? B'diavad, because you were supposed to, kosher. But b'fnim, the chazav and nosam b'chutz. What if you first spritz the b'fnim and then b'chutz? Then you have a problem. Why? Rabbi Kiva Poisel. Rabbi Kiva holds his posel, and we'll soon see why. The Chum say will still be kosher. Rabbi Kiva Omer kol damim shenichnasu lechaper behechal psulim. If dam of any carbon was taken in to the hechal wrongfully, because it doesn't belong to the hechal, you're spritzing it on the mizbech hachitzon, it passes the whole carbon. So therefore, if you spritz b'fnim, it passes the whole carbon. Even if you spritz b'chutz later, it wouldn't make a difference. Chum say this halacha that if dam that needs to be b'chutz gets brought b'fnim is possible, that only applies to a carbon chatas, and we learned that from Sukkah. But all other kabbalas wouldn't be a problem. So therefore, the Chacham hold that other kabbalas, if it got mixed up with the chatas apnimi, and you already spritzed b'fnim, you could continue and spritz b'chutz. Eliezer Eimer Alpha Osham. The Osham is also like the chatos. Shenemer kachatos ka'osham. And also, if its time is brought to Fnim, it would also be possible. Okay, Baruch Hashem, we finished up Pei, and tomorrow we'll go to the pub.
Oh.
What?
Hey, Aleph.
I said Pei? I'm sorry, Pei Aleph.